Welcome to DMM Downloads. We are podcasting another conversation about DMM between Jeff Crabtree and me, Rudy Rivera. Jeff and I are teamed together in Northern Colorado in a ministry we call DMM NOCO. DMM NOCO is unleashing disciple-making movements in Northern Colorado, and we thought it a good idea to start a podcast as a way to bring awareness and resourcing to ordinary people who are passionate about making multiplying disciple makers in our natural networks. Thanks for joining us in this journey. We hope you get a DMM download from this conversation. Hey Jeff, we're back.
We're back, Rudy.
For another DMM download, and we've been talking off the air, so to speak, about this concept or this habit of FIND, the habit of a person of peace. And as we kind of wrapped up the last episode, Jeff and I were sitting here talking, thinking, it seems like there could be some helpful additions we could make to that episode. So we're going to have episode 2 here again, talk a little bit more about the person of peace principle. And we want to maybe give a few examples, maybe talk about our own journeys a bit, to kind of share what does this really look like on the ground, or at least through our lens. We were both admitting, we're learning a lot here, guys. This is not a finished product, a finished example of the person of peace principle and habit, but we are trying to lean in, and we're learning, and so we wanted to kind of give a little bit more of a download here. So Jeff, take it away.
Yeah, as we talked, Rudy, is that we've tried to share some ideas, some concepts, some biblical principles of the person of peace. But how did that happen in my life? And then how did it happen around me? And so we can both share that. Actually, I was a traditional pastor leading churches and leading a church, and I got a call from a gentleman out of Dallas, Texas, who was leading a mission sending agency. And so he wanted to talk to me about some things. So I got this phone call from somebody I did not know and didn't know what the agenda was. But in the course of conversation, he related to me they did disciple-making movements, DMM, among unreached people groups. And so I said, well, I don't know what DMM is. I've never heard of that. And he began to unpack that a little bit and then invite me to read a book and have contact with someone who furthered this whole idea of DMM. Well, I think I became a person of peace. I was a person of peace, meaning he contacted me and I was receptive, I was open, willing to learn. And then over a period of time, obviously I got intrigued. I sensed the Lord in the middle of that. It became a part of my life and lifestyle with my wife and my son and in our neighborhood, and began to lead our church. So I was a person of peace. I became a person of peace. I didn't see that coming. And so I guess that would be my experience, is that God had already been preparing my heart. Sovereign God had already been working in my life with the circumstances so that when He contacted me, I was not only open, but I really leaned in and I began to grow, and then I began to share it with my oikos, with my family and my social network and the church that I was leading. So that might be an example of not just sharing ideas and concepts and spiritual principles, is how did it happen to me? And so without going into too deep, I think that might give our listeners some idea of what happened, that I became a person of peace. And I'm still a person of peace, because everywhere I go, I'm leaning into and expanding DMM among all of my contacts.
Yeah.
So how did it happen for you, Rudy?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. That's a great story. By the way, guys, we're here in my living room, Timnath. We got a dog, so if you hear noises in the background, it's usually the dog. So
welcome to real life.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for me, Jeff, and I've told you this story a million times. There's so many details and permutations, but for me, it's probably been about a 30-year journey, I would say. I feel like those are some of the dots the Lord's connected in me, where I remember being younger, and I think I just lost my recording.
Battery.
Let's see, is the recording back on? Sorry about that, guys. Anyhow, technical difficulties.
Hey, real life, man.
Real life. So I was talking about my story. So really quickly, I remember being on staff at a church feeling like, why do we pass by hundreds of people every Sunday morning, passing by lots of people not in the church, me having a desire for them to be a part of the work of God, to know Jesus, but me doing church in the process. And that was just one of those connecting points. And then Jeff kind of approached me with the thoughts of a habits of a multiplying disciple course, the thing we've been talking about, these habits that we're talking about. And I remember pulling a folder off my shelf over there in my office that it had the 7 habits of a disciple of Jesus. And the idea of multiplication has been deposited into my life in ministry and just as a Christian for decades. So all of that was kind of just coming together when you approached me. And I was thinking like, I'm in a new phase of life and ministry, and I'm God, what do you want me to do with my life? And you caught me at that time. And when we started having those early conversations, maybe 4 years ago, I just literally all of those dots started like flooding into my mind, and I was like, God, you've I think had this on my heart for years. I just didn't know how to express it. So that would be my quick answer.
Yeah, I think that, again, it undergirds the whole principle that it has to be something that God's doing. We don't create it, we don't force it, we don't make it. We're just getting to partner with God to find those people that He's connecting those dots, and it's the right moment. God makes everything beautiful in His own time.
Wow, that's good.
And then, so my experience of being a person of peace, you being a person of peace, and then since we're talking about the principle of find, I can tell you how we found our first person of peace in our neighborhood. We were obviously putting a circle of loss around the lostness of our neighborhood. My wife and I going out prayer walking and engaging with people and meeting people. And we met Brian, Bryn, and Della. And Brian being the husband, Della was his mom, and Bryn was his wife. And we just began to build relational equity with them. And then we invited them into what we call a discovery process. And they were willing. So we said, well, maybe they are persons of peace. And so I can't tell the whole story, but it got to a particular place that Brian came to faith. He was not a follower of Jesus at that time. Bryn, his wife, became a person of peace, and she got saved. And Della, his mom, gave her life to Christ. But then it broadened beyond that to Bryn's brother Adam, and then Adam's wife came to faith, and then Brian's best friend Nelson and Phoenix came to faith. So the point being was that we didn't know when we got going. They just seemed to be open and interested, and so we kept leaning in with this concept and thought and prayer of the person of peace. And so it just came to, again, their oikos, their social network, their family. Many began to follow Jesus because we think that they were persons of peace. If that illustrates the concept that we've been trying to put forth.
Yeah, that's well said. When you were sharing that, the pathway of the habits of a multiplying disciple just kind of came to mind. And I'm picturing, we say this in habits training, that it's a pathway. However, it's not always linear.
Correct.
We know life is not always linear. So, but we do start with the heart of God. And I just going back to that story you just shared, knowing you well enough all these years, I know you'd been praying that heart of God prayer. You'd been
Correct.
caught by the heart of God for lostness, and then you use that phrase. You drew a circle around lostness. So now you're being intentional with how you're living. You're praying for people, for the lost. You're engaging your neighbors, Bryn, Brian, and Della, and God identifies them as a person of peace, and then on and on and on goes from there. So that pathway, maybe that's a helpful little illustration or words to describe the pathway, is I know, Jeff. Like you were in that pathway. You were practicing these habits,
Right.
and that's why, for me, that's why one of the reasons why I like the habits so much is,
Correct.
again, it's accessible. Like, hey, if you're listening to this, you can do these habits
Correct.
and trust that will God reveal persons of peace. We believe He will. He's got more persons of peace in this world for us to find.
Correct.
A habit of find. I know for my life, I don't have that story yet, but I am praying for that. I'm leaning in. I'm going, God,
You'll have it.
yeah, exactly. Lord, bring this about, because it's not about us. It's not about our ministry or DMM NOCO or any of these things. It's about God's work. This is God's heart, God's work.
Exactly.
Anyhow, so I'm kind of just responding to your story there, like right now in the moment, thinking, wow, Jeff, yeah, what an incredible story of a person of peace, that this habit or this principle, but coming on the heels of these other habits we've been talking about.
Exactly.
Do you want to say anything else?
Well, I think maybe whenever we're going to land the plane here on this one is, well, let's remember what the Bible says about what Jesus did. He came to seek and then to save. Right? Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't say that He came to just save the world. It says He came to seek and save the world. And so we can't jump over that whole thing, that part of this whole journey of following God, partnering with God, and seeing disciples and multiplying disciples is that there's a seeking component, and that's what we call find or looking for persons of peace. It's just aligning with what Jesus did. He came seeking as the Son of Man, seeking where is the Father working, because He said He only did what the Father was showing Him or doing, and saying only what the Father said. So there was a seeking component. And so in DMM is embedded this whole idea of seeking and finding these persons of peace. So we're aligning with really the activity of Jesus.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, really well said. Any other thoughts before we close here on any kind of examples or tangible words shared, not just the principle, the bigger picture, but anything more specific?
Well, I think it's a lot of it, Rudy, we've talked about is intentionality.
Yeah.
You're not going to find persons of peace until you engage that lost world. And it's not always easy, and it's not always comfortable, and sometimes you have to persevere. But like we said, it becomes a habit, an intentional habit, as we are going to continue to step into lostness, a circle of need, a circle of lostness. And so again, it's one of those things I wish sometimes that it was easier, or it's really more of an art than a science sometimes, but it's like showing up. I'm going to align with Jesus to go seek and save the lost, and believing this whole idea that eventually by my obedience and intentionality, stepping into lostness, God's going to help me find a person of peace who He wants me to minister to, and then from that we'll begin to see multiplying disciples and disciple makers from that.
I think that's a great place to end today. Well said, Jeff. Thank you for that download.
Thanks, Rudy.
Yeah, thanks for being a practitioner.
Practitioner, you bet.
Practitioner of habits and movement. Thanks, Jeff, for that engaging download. In DMM, we like to say that disciples are learners. I know I'm learning a lot from my conversations with you, Jeff. From all of us in DMM NOCO, we hope you got a DMM download from the conversation today. Don't forget to leave this podcast a review wherever you are listening online. If you found this conversation helpful, please head over to our site, dmmnoco.com, where you can find more content for your DMM journey, including a self-paced Habits of a Multiplying Disciple course. The course is designed to give you practical next steps to becoming a DMM practitioner and multiplying disciple maker. You can take that course for free at dmmnoco.com. We will be back next week with another engaging DMM download episode. Until then, may you hear from God through His Spirit and take simple steps of obedience in what you hear.